A secret between iron walls. The first time Officer Maya Reyes pressed her back against the cold concrete wall of cell block D and cried, it wasn't because of the job. It was because of a woman named Simone, a woman she was never supposed to love, a woman separated from her by a steel door, a badge and 100 rules written in stone. Maya had been a corrections officer for 6 years when Simone Carter arrived at Harlow, women's correctional facility, on a gray Tuesday morning in October. Maya had processed dozens of new inmates that year alone. She knew how to look at a person and see only a file number, a charge, a set of rules to enforce. She had built that wall inside herself brick by brick, because the alternative was drowning. But the moment Simone walked through intake, head held high despite the handcuffs, eyes dark and steady as still water, a bruise fading yellow at her collarbone, Maya felt something inside her shift. Not dramatically, not like the movies. It was quiet. The way a fault line moves before an earthquake. Small, deep, and impossible to take back. Simone had been convicted of manslaughter. The court record said she had killed the man who had spent 3 years making her life a living hell. The details were buried in legal language, and a fight, a struggle, a kitchen knife. A verdict that the jury handed down in less than 4 hours. Simone had not testified in her own defense. She arrived at Harlow with 2 years left on her sentence, no visitors listed, and an expression on her face that Maya would later come to understand was not coldness but survival. It was the face of a woman who had stopped expecting anything from the world and had decided to simply endure it. Maya tried to stay professional. She was good at her job, firm, fair, respected by both staff and inmates, which was a rare and difficult thing to be in a place like Harlow. She did her rounds. She enforced the rules. She did not get close to inmates. That was the first rule of corrections work. The rule they drilled into you from day one, the rule that kept everyone safe. But Harlow was understaffed that winter, and Maya kept being assigned to cell block D, and cell block D was where Simone slept, where Simone ate, where Simone spent her days reading library, books with a concentration so total it looked almost like prayer. The first real conversation happened by accident. Maya was doing a late-night check when she found Simone sitting on the floor of her cell back against the bunk, holding a letter that had clearly been read so many times the creases had worn soft. She wasn't crying. She was just sitting there in the blue fluorescent light, very still, and Maya made the mistake of asking if she was all right. Simone looked up at her with those quiet, dark eyes and said that no, she was not all right, but that she appreciated being asked. It was such a simple, honest answer that Maya stood there for a moment longer than she should have, and then she nodded and then she moved on. But she thought about it for days afterward. The honesty of it, the dignity. Over the weeks that followed, they began to exist in each other's orbit in small, careful ways. Maya would slow her pace past Simone's cell. Simone would look up from whatever she was reading. Sometimes they exchanged a few words about a book, about the weather outside the narrow window, about nothing important. But the nothing felt important. It felt like something building. Maya knew she was crossing a line that existed for good reasons. She told herself it was just kindness. She told herself Simone was different. She told herself a lot of things that helped her keep walking toward something she already knew would cost her. If you believe that even in the darkest places, people still deserve to be seen, take a moment right now and share this story with someone who needs to be reminded of that truth. Because what happened between Maya and Simone was not simply a love story. It was proof that the human heart does not ask for permission. Winter deepened. The facility grew colder, louder, harder. An inmate in cell block A was sent to the infirmary after a fight. Morale among the staff dropped. Maya worked double shifts 3 weeks in a row, coming home to her small apartment to stare at the ceiling until the alarm dragged her back. She had no partner, no family nearby, no one who particularly noticed whether she was okay or not. She had been alone for a long time and had convinced herself she preferred it. But Harlow and Simone were dismantling that conviction slowly and thoroughly. The night everything changed was in February. A pipe had burst in the utility corridor, and half the block was being rerouted through a temporary holding space while repairs were made. The chaos of it meant that Maya and Simone ended up alone in a narrow supply room for nearly 20 minutes while the lockdown protocols were being sorted out. Neither of them spoke for the first few minutes. Then Simone said something that Maya had not expected. She said that she had noticed Maya, not in the way that required explanation. Just that she had noticed and that it had mattered. In a place where being noticed usually meant something was about to go wrong, Maya stood very still with her hands at her sides and her heart beating so loudly she was certain Simone could hear it. And then, without planning it, without allowing herself to think about consequences, she reached out and briefly, gently, pressed her hand over Simone's, just for a moment. Just long enough to say, "I see you too." What grew between them after that was not reckless. They were both too careful, too damaged in their own ways, too aware of the stakes. There were no dramatic declarations, no stolen kisses in shadowed hallways. Nothing that could be used against either of them. What they had was made of smaller things. A look across a room that lasted a second longer than necessary. Maya leaving a poetry collection from the library cart at Simone's door. Simone folding a small note into the cover of a returned book. Not a love letter, but a line she'd underlined. A thought she wanted to share. A piece of herself offered quietly and without expectation. It was intimacy built in the margins. Love assembled in secret out of fragments too small for anyone else to see. But secrets breathe, and eventually someone notices the rhythm of their breath. A senior officer named Briggs began watching Maya during her rounds. A comment was made at shift change, half joking, about favoritism. Maya felt the ground tilting beneath her. She lay awake running the calculations of what she stood to lose. Her job, her pension, her reputation, possibly Simone's safety, against the impossible, irrational, unbudgeted fact that for the first time in years, she felt awake. She felt like herself. She felt like something in her that had gone quiet a long time ago had started, tentatively to speak again. The investigation, when it came, was quiet and quick. There was nothing explicit to find, and so they found nothing. But Maya was transferred off cell block D rotation, and Simone was moved to a different wing, and that was the end of it, cleanly, administratively, like a sentence closed with a period. They did not get to say goodbye. Maya drove home that last night and sat in her car in the parking lot of her apartment building. For a long time, not crying, just breathing in the way that Simone had taught her. Not that Simone had ever said anything about breathing, but that being around her had reminded Maya that it was something worth doing. Simone was released 14 months later. Maya knew the date because she still had access to the system. She did not go to the gate. She did not have any right to be there, and she knew it. She went to work and did her rounds and came home and made dinner, and she told herself that was the end. But 3 weeks later, a letter arrived at her home address. She never found out how Simone had gotten it. The letter was short. It said that Simone was okay, that she had found a room in a city 2 hours north, a part-time job, a library nearby, that she wanted Maya to know that whatever had existed between them, unnamed and unclaimed as it had been, had kept her going through the worst of it. That kindness, real kindness, the kind that cost something, had saved her life more than once. Maya read the letter standing at her kitchen counter. She read it again sitting at the table. She read it a third time on the couch with her knees pulled to her chest. Then she wrote back. It took her 4 drafts to say something true enough to send. What she finally wrote was simple, that she understood, that she was glad that Simone had saved. Her, too, had cracked. Something open in her that she hadn't known was sealed. She said she hoped the library was a good one. Before this story ends, drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever loved someone in a way the world said you shouldn't? Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. They wrote letters for almost a year before. Maya took a weekend off and drove 2 hours north. They met in a coffee shop near the library Simone had mentioned. They sat across from each other at a small table by the window. 2 women who had found each other in the most impossible of places. And they talked for 4 hours like people who had been waiting a long time to say things out loud. There was no dramatic reunion, no cinematic kiss in the rain. There was just 2 people, finally in the same room without walls or uniforms or rules between them, choosing each other as plainly and as profoundly as breathing. If this story reached something in you, if it reminded you that love finds its way even through iron walls, even in the places we least expect it, please like this video and subscribe, so more stories like this one can find the people who need them. Leave a comment telling us what part of Maya and Simone's story stayed with you. Your heart heard something tonight. Honor that. Because the truth that Maya and Simone learned, the truth that stayed with them long after the letters, long after the coffee shop, long after the world had moved on to other things, is this: love does not require the right circumstances. It requires only two people willing to see each other fully, in the dark with nothing to gain and everything to lose. And in that seeing, somehow improbably, magnificently, they both found their way home.